I trust that you've heard the news. We may finally have a depiction of the last Roman emperor, Constantine XI Palaiologos, from when he was still alive. A contemporary depiction. Now, if this is true, that could be the biggest Byzantine news we've had this decade. And it would be a truly monumental discovery in art history as well. So, is it true? And how do we know if it's Constantine and not someone else? Today, I'll share my thoughts on this. The source of the information is usually where we may determine the truth or lie of a subject, and to the source of the information we will now go. This news was announced by the Hellenic Ministry of Culture about a week ago, and here on their website we're gonna see what they have to say. In this text, apparently what we do know is that during the conservation work for the Old Monastery of the Taxiarches in Aigialeia, which is a place in the northern Peloponnese, about 15 kilometers away from AU, there were 2 layers of wall paintings discovered in the Catholicon. And these were late Byzantine wall paintings. The archaeologist, Dr. Anastasia Komousis, has identified the second layer of the wall painting to be from the middle of the 15th century, and the figure painted here, which you can see depicted, as the Emperor of Byzantium, Constantine XI Palaiologos. But, well, she doesn't really say why? Okay, well, we'll leave that question for a bit later. The ministry did a good job of explaining the attire of the painted figure, which belongs to that of a Palaiologan despot. And we know Constantine was a Palaiologan despot. Although this doesn't really explain why it can only be Constantine and not one of his own brothers who renovated his monastery, Demetrius and Thomas, who were also despots of the Morea after Constantine. And and a very interesting claim that the text has is that the portrait is not idealistic, but realistic. And now to my thoughts. So why does this painting belong to Constantine and not anyone else in his family? Because among his brothers, a lot served a considerable time in the Morea, as the empire's territory gradually shrank and the Peloponnese became the playground for the Palaiologan princess. So we know that Constantine's father, Manuel II Palaiologos, had 6 sons. There was Ioannis, who became the emperor. There was Theodoros II, who became despot of the Morea. There was Andronicus, who was despot of Thessaloniki. There was Constantine himself. Then there were Demetrius and Thomas. So aside from Constantine, his second eldest brother, Despot Theodoros II Palaiologos, whose life was pretty much spent in the Despotate, could have this portrait, no? Because Theodoros only left his post when he switched appanages with Constantine, out of jealousy that his younger brother might succeed as emperor if he kept being so close to the eldest brother, the Vasilevs Ioannis VIII. A mid-15th century imperial portrait found in the Peloponnese could be that of this despot, just like how his namesake uncle Theodorus I also got a beautiful donor image in a church. And then, aside from Constantine, who was despot of the Morea himself for some years, he was succeeded by his 2 younger brothers, Thomas and Demetrius Palaiologos, and they renovated this church. But could it not be that they commissioned the portrait for themselves to satisfy their egos? If you look at their stories of infighting in the Morea, which will be covered in the final episode of my series on Eastern Roman history, you would find that placating their own interests suited these guys much more than honoring the memory of their elder brother Constantine, as even after Constantinople fell in 1453, and Constantine died in the defense of the city, they were still whining about their own personal issues and about how somebody is infringing on someone else's territory and everything like that, instead of, rallying a resistance against Mehmed and the Ottomans, whose army slew their heroic brother. So why would these selfish pricks of all people try to make a wall painting to honor their own brother, who was a much better despot of the Morea than either of them, and they probably didn't need to remind the populace that they lost a great despot to be replaced by a pair of self-interested jerks. There is no inscription next to the painted figure on the wall painting, so we really can't be sure. But I am of the opinion that it is still Constantine, and I have a few reasons as to why. Reasons which the Ministry of Culture forgot to enumerate. To start with the hard, solid facts, we know that the attire of the figure here is that of a despot, and a late Palaiologan despot as well. If we look at the descriptions of the courtly attires in Pseudo-Kodinos, the cloak with the circles and eagles is a very fair indicator. And I've actually drew a despot once if you're interested in actually knowing more about their very precise clothings. And also, I would like to ask you to turn your attention to a manuscript illumination from Manuel II Palaiologos, the father of Constantine. Manuel once sent this beautiful drawing as a present to Paris during one of his diplomatic missions. And here, the whole imperial family as of the very early 1400s, so a bit before Constantine's birth, are depicted. There is the Emperor Manuel, there is his Empress Helena, and his 3 sons. His eldest son and heir, Ioannis, is dressed like the Emperor, and his 2 younger sons, who were alive at the moment, Theodoros and Andronikos, are depicted in the red cloak and red shoes of a despot. And that is the kind of clothing that you have seen on the wall painting. Even though the figure on the wall painting also has layers of more imperial associating clothes underneath, like the loros, and he has a crown and he has a scepter. But that's not exactly a problem, because despots of the Morea have depicted themselves in this imperial high manner before. If we look at the donor portrait of Despot Theodoros I that I mentioned a bit earlier, we can see that he has basically the attire of an emperor. He is in full regalia, much like his brother Manuel II. Doesn't seem to offend the emperor, so yeah. This man that we see on the wall of the Catholicon of the Old Monastery of the Taxiarches has to be one of these later generation of despots. If not Constantine, then at least one of Constantine's brothers. So who among the 6 sons of Manuel could it be? I've already voiced my opinion that I don't think it's the Vasilevs himself, the eldest son, Ioannis VIII, because we do have a lot of surviving paintings about him, as he went to Renaissance Italy, and his appearance left a great impression on the Italian artists who decided to draw him, and we know what he looks like, and he doesn't look like this man. I also do not think that this is the 3rd eldest brother, Andronikos, the despot of Thessaloniki, who literally never ever set foot in the Morea until he went there to die. Yeah, pretty sad story, but anyway, that's for another day. So that leaves us with the 2nd brother, Despot Theodoros II, Constantine himself, and Demetrius and Thomas. Now, we could also try to eliminate Theodoros II from the lot, because Theodoros II, he was a very, let's say, classic despot of the Morea. He stayed near the capital of the Morea, which is Mistras, and he almost never left there. The place where the monastery is at, which is Aigialeia, is very much in the north, like at the very northernmost tip of the Peloponnese. And these are places more associated with Constantine or Thomas Palaiologos, who actually had their own holdings there, because they unleashed their own conquests there when they were young men, when they were looking for more land. They targeted the Latins still squatting in the Peloponnese, mostly in the north, so the Principality of Achaia and the Despotate of Epirus, which was very much a Latin principality by this point, and not at all Roman, not at all anything to do with the Comneno Ducas dynasty of before. Constantine conquered this place called Clarenza in the northwest, and he had his seat there temporarily for some time. Thomas, too, was the one who ended the Principality of Achaia, and they were very active in the north. Constantine especially, because he was the one who tried to take the power of the Despotate of the Morea out of just the Peloponnese and into central Greece, into Athens, into Attica, into the Pintos mountain range as well. So, yes, I do believe that if we have a church in the northern Peloponnese with a depiction of an imperial figure, it would be someone who actually did something there. Constantine and Thomas were the ones who did the most there. Theodoros didn't do much, and afterwards, when Constantine left the Morea and left this despotate to his brothers, Demetrius and Thomas, it was still Thomas that got the north, and Demetrius who ruled in the south like Theodoros. So maybe, I don't know, it's just my gut instinct, but I don't think either Demetrius or Theodoros would have much of a claim to have some portrait in the north of the Peloponnese. Because the Byzantines, they do like to associate themselves with their own places, with their own holdings, especially in this day and age where the local lords needed the local support. Besides, we do also have a sort of a portrait of Theodoros when he was a young boy. And if we try to compare the portrait with the portrait discovered in the monastery of the Taxiarches, we can sort of compare it and see that if we assume the manuscript illumination of Theodoros is like 100% accurate, then his hair is also a bit too dark for the portrait in the monastery. The painted figure has more of a brownish hair, while Theodoros is like completely black. But of course, with these things, we never know. It could be just an artistic effect. And although we have no idea what Demetrius looks like, he just, I don't know, he doesn't strike me as the kind of the person who would be the kind of person that we see painted there. Like, he just doesn't feel like that kind of person. He doesn't feel regal enough based on his own actions. I mean, of course, I may be biased here, but yeah, Demetrius really didn't do much in the Peloponnese, especially not in the north, and he didn't do anything for the empire either, except make it worse for everyone. So that leaves us with only Thomas as a real contender for who the portrait should be of. Well, as we mentioned earlier, Thomas got to the north of the Peloponnese after it was divided between him and Demetrius, and even though they were fighting all the time, they decided to visit Hosius Leontius, a local holy man, together, and build this monastery in his honor. But do you really think that Thomas would let a monastery in his domain have a picture of a brother that he hates? No, of course not. It should either be himself or a brother that he feels more comfortable with. For example, Constantine. Constantine and Thomas have worked together for quite some time when they were still in the Morea. And, yeah, if Thomas wants to honor a brother, I think it could be Constantine. But could it also be Thomas himself? Well, it is possible. Now, just like for Ioannis VIII Palaiologos, we do have a very good portrait of Thomas, because he visited Renaissance Italy, and the Italian painters love these exotic subjects, and they painted Thomas. We know what he looks like. He is painted on a fresco in the Siena Cathedral. And if we compare this figure here, which is Thomas, the one in the big blue hat, very beautiful blue hat by the way, with the picture that we found of Constantine, supposedly Constantine, then we might notice that, well, the features, they don't match up 100%, but they could be a painting of Thomas when he was slightly younger. I mean, the shape of the beard certainly does look like it's likely that they could be the same person, even though the Siena portrait of Thomas looks like his beard is fluffier and thinner, but it could just be mostly a problem of age. And other than that, the long face and the long nose is also, well, it could be his own features. Well, here Thomas is bald, but you know, hair is an interesting thing, especially if you're a middle-aged man. It goes away very quickly. So there's really nothing really disproving this man from being Thomas. The painted figure could be Thomas, but I think it's more possible that it's Constantine. And I say this because I am an artist, and I drew Constantine before. And it's a lie when someone says we don't have any contemporary portraits of Constantine, because we do, just not a very good one. It's this miniature in the Mutinensis Graecus manuscript, and it's about the only depiction of Constantine, contemporary depiction of Constantine, that we've been using until we thought we discovered his contemporary portrait in the monastery of the Taxiarches. And as an artist who studied this miniature and tried to incorporate as much of this figure's features as possible in my own drawing, I can say that it does look alike, very much so. The figures do bear some striking similarities. The mustache is almost an exact match, and so is the hair color. I mean, if we just count by what we see as his beard as his hair color, then yes, the hair color is almost exactly the same. The eyes and the eyebrows as well, and the nose. It could be just standardized imperial portrait at this point, but I think if you look carefully at the faces depicted on the Mutinensis Graecus and in the Monastery of the Taxiarches, you would notice that these are pretty similar features, pretty similar people. Now, the beard shape is slightly a problem because on the Mutinensis Graecus portrait of Constantine, which we know for sure is Constantine, he has a very round beard. But on the Monastery of the Taxiarches portrait, it looks very wavy and almost a bit forked at the end, much like the portrait of Thomas that we see a bit earlier. But I think this could just be a small problem, a slight change in beard style, if we may. If the Mutinensis Graecus portrait had hair on it, then we could have been able to determine if the faces are the same much easier. But for now, I think we can leave it at that. The figure looks very much like the one really contemporary portrait of Constantine that we do have. And there is a slight possibility it could be Thomas. Also, even slighter chances that it could be either Demetrius or Theodorus Palaiologos. But for now, I think we can say that it is highly likely that the new portrait discovered in the Old Monastery of the Taxiarches in Aigialeia is Constantine XI Palaiologos, the last Roman emperor. Now I can already hear some of you saying, also, Business Simp, you've made this whole video just to troll us and to make us think that it is not Constantine when you also think that it is Constantine. Actually no, I didn't make this video to troll anyone, it's just to voice my own thoughts. And to give you... think of it as a thought exercise. Like, how do we really know that it's Constantine? Because the study of history is based on facts, not just whatever we think is true. So now that if anyone else asks you, so can we be sure that it's Constantine? You can say, no, we're not sure, but here are more reasons that we think why it could be Constantine and not one of his other brothers. And I think it's also a good walkthrough of the history of the Morea and the history of the East Roman Empire in the very late stages of its life, which will be covered by me very soon in a new video. So, discovering this new cool fresco in an old monastery, well, it's a God-given opportunity for me to do some promotion for my next video. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Have a nice day.